Christmas has come and gone. The new year is soon upon us, and we've gone crazy, but not all the way until we get Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Locked On Twins, your daily go-to destination for the top Minnesota Twins insight, discourse, and analysis. Personally, it's my favorite show of the Locked On Podcast Network, which, by the way, brings you your team every day. I'm co-host Dave Brown, a professional ball writer since 1998, a BBWAA member since 2012, and a Baseball Hall of Fame voter since this past year. This is my second ballot. I'm very much working on my second ballot right now, so that's what's going on behind the scenes. But in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at AnswerDaveBrown if you like, or you can find me on Blue Sky at AnswerDave, simply AnswerDave. So yay there. I'm back, and so is Brandon Warren across from me in cyberspace. He's a Twins watcher for 30 years, who not long ago covered the team on a daily basis professionally. He asks that you elevate the discourse on social media, be it at Twitter at Brandon_Warren, or simply at Warren on Blue Sky. It's at, right? They still do the ats on Blue Sky. I haven't posted enough on there to have the ins and outs and the ats.
As far as I know, and I actually put the at on your name on the screen too. So that is, it looks a little bit more official, which I'm very excited about.
Oh, officially, I'm excited. So here's what's coming up on this podcast. The AL Central has been busy at work preparing for the 2025 season. And so of the Twins, well, we'll see about that. So we'll talk about what the Detroit Tigers have done, adding Gleyber Torres to the lineup and what are the consequences of that for the likes of Spencer Torkelson and Colt Keith and Keith Colt. And so we'll look at that. We'll compare what there's no real news on the Twins ownership front. So we'll just kind of look around and see what the AL Central is doing and maybe what the Twins aren't as far as preparing for 2025 and how it all matters. And mentioned the Hall of Fame vote. Everybody's got to get their votes in for the official Hall of Fame vote by the end of this month. So that's only a few days away. I've got to figure out who's on my list. I think I'm voting for 10 people, at least voting for 7 for sure. It might be 10. And maybe we could talk about that too. But in the meantime, Brandon, tell us, is there anybody special in our lives bringing us this episode?
Yeah, good evening, sports fans. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 rather, in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Yeah, just one and then the large bulk of a second week left in the NFL season. So hop on that FanDuel train if you've been thinking about it. You don't have much time for the regular season left.
I don't think there's much betting on whether the Twins are actually going to make any off-season moves. Their opponents, their rivals in the AL Central are it's not a huge deal yet, but they've added Gleyber Torres. Do you think this means the Tigers have? Do you think this means that Alex Bregman is not coming to Detroit? Is this basically a white flag on that?
I don't know, because I've seen it framed that way, and I've seen it framed as though, yeah, they still have money to spend, and this doesn't really do anything to third base, though they have Jace Jung, and so I don't know what the plan is with Spencer Torkelson. I don't know what the plan is. We know what the plan is for Colt Keith. He's going to move over to first base, which clouds things for Spencer Torkelson. But with that said, like, what kind of is wrinkling my brain is $15 million for 1 year. Again, 1 year deals, kind of hard to screw up, but not a great defender, league average bat. Again, I understand he's young, but you're only getting him for 1 year anyway. I don't know. I don't understand the fit. I think, no good team is a second baseman away from wherever they're headed. I don't know. Again, it's not my money, and I'm not trying to say owners shouldn't spend money, but this one to me was like,
No, I kind of agree. I've been a little disappointed in how Gleyber has developed. He's been kind of boring and inconsistent, and sometimes he could be a hot hitter out there, but I just don't. He has not developed the way that maybe we thought he would when he was a Cubs prospect and he came over in the Aroldis Chapman trade now something like 8 years ago or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know how much it moves the needle. I don't know if Colt Keith is going to hit enough to be a first baseman. He had a good. He got going as the season went on. He had kind of a slow start. They gave him a big contract to buy up some of his younger seasons, and he probably had a little bit of a hard time adjusting to that as well. The major leagues, but he was pretty good by the end of the season, and I recall a couple of good moments in the playoffs. There weren't a lot of big hitting moments for the Tigers, but he had one or two of them. So again, I don't know if he's a first baseman long term. Spencer Torkelson's a guy who, I liked a lot, like a lot of other people. But if there's been one kind of consistent thing about Spencer's seasons, he's had basically 3 MLB seasons, is that he takes forever to get going. His first halves are awful. I have the data here, sir. No, that's not the right page. This is the right data. Spencer Torkelson, first half hitter, 224 games, 21 homers in 224 games. That's, whatever. A 211 batting average, 289 on base, 349 slugging in his career. In the second half, he picks up on things. 237, 319, 462. That's more closer to what you want. And it's still, Comerica Park eats into that a little bit. So that's pretty good. That's another thing too about Gleyber Torres going there. I'm not sure if his hitting profile is great for that ballpark, even though they kind of keep bringing the fences back in for the right-handed batters. So I don't know. The Tigers I feel like, they finally broke through last season and were, put it together and got real hot in the second half. I just don't know. I see some regression in their future. I really do.
Yeah, there's really no AL Central team outside of the Twins and the White Sox where regression doesn't make not only a little bit of sense, but a lot of sense. And don't get me wrong, from the viewpoint of adding players to make your team better, like the Tigers adding Gleyber Torres, the only thing worse than having players that don't perform is when guys get hurt and you're forced to play younger guys. Signing guys like Gleyber Torres protect you against that. And so if Torkelson hits and Keith gets hurt and you have Gleyber at second, you're protected against that. And if Torkelson doesn't hit, but Keith plays, you just to protect yourself and sign guys like this, it's not completely without merit. It's just, to me, it kind of trips my triggers. I don't know if I would have done that, but I get why they did it. I'm not sure. I don't see it as the immense upgrade that they maybe feel it is. And does that mean they are still thinking about immense upgrades? What are they still planning on playing Javier Baez at shortstop at all? I know Trey Sweeney kind of looked like he had a future there and still obviously is an exciting young player. But yeah, I'm still not quite sure what to make of really what any of the AL Central teams are doing this offseason. And it's a battle of attrition. And I think the Twins might be the most is atrocious the word? Nutritious, atrocious, whatever. The Twins are the most attrite of the attrition battle. And it's frustrating on the front that, you look at gambling odds, and I'm not a huge gambling guy, but I see the odds. The Twins are right in that mix to win the division, according to Vegas, and they could easily salt that away with a couple savvy moves. In fact, I don't know, I think you saw over at Access Twins, I wrote how I would finish off this offseason and how you could still do it within this goofy budget that's been placed upon them. But again, to this point, it's a Rule 5 guy and a trade for a catcher who can play a little infield, Mickey Gasper, which we haven't talked about yet either. That kind of came down here, just over the holiday week. And outside of that, it's been crickets, man. And I don't know. I understand why people are frustrated. I really do.
Crickets do have protein, though, if you eat them. So
yeah,
just throwing that out there in case.
No, good point.
People get desperate, but it's kind of a desperate time because you see the cost for these free agents, and it's not anything. You see 15 million for Gleyber Torres. You see 12.5 million for Paul Goldschmidt, and while I don't consider those great values necessarily, unless Goldie somehow reverts to let's say 2022 form.
Yeah.
Or Gleyber has like his best season, which I see as difficult to predict happening.
He is 28, so I mean there is something to it. But yeah,
there is something to it. But in that ballpark, I don't know. I'm still worried about that part of it too.
Yeah.
It drains you. But these are moves that in a different context, the Twins could afford to make and have made in the past. We're not talking about very expensive ads. And I think despite the fact that the Twins finished behind the Tigers last year, they still have lots of advantages over them as far as the club that is built already that's there in front of them.
I would compare the Gleyber signing to is like Jonathan Scope a few years ago. Like just a 1 year fill in, see what you got.
So that's a little bit frustrating. Let's take our first break and we'll talk a little bit more to see if we can sort of are we interested at all in Spencer Torkelson being available, and is there any reason to think that he might be available for the Twins? Let's look at that and other things. Maybe talk about Gasper a little bit and some other changes that have been made in the offseason since the last time we talked.
Are you rocking with FanDuel yet? Because if you're not, now is the perfect time because you can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that $5 bet hits. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Check out that FanDuel app. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And I should clarify, actually, now it's $250 in bonus bets, not $150. So if you're listening to the ad,
don't leave $100 on the table.
Right, exactly.
So Spencer Torkelson, he's kind of the he's got a little bit of a Andrew Vaughn of the White Sox, but for the Tigers thing going on. A very high draft pick, one of the first. I want to say he was the second pick overall. Something like that. He's pretty high, and it has not worked out. I mentioned his statisticals before, his first half stats, not so good, Al. Actually, he was the first overall pick in 2020.
Yeah. Weird year.
I don't know if he's had his moments. He gets hot sometimes, but that's the kind of guy that. He's better than the first baseman that the Twins probably have now because they don't have anybody at first base.
Have you thought about how weird it would be to play without a first baseman? Like, I feel like that'd be pretty rough. Like, so many things happen. No, but honestly, it looks like he's going to be about minimum for this year. I think he's ARB1 after this next season. So not expensive, but at the same time, too, like you have to look at what's the incentive for the Tigers to move him. Is anyone else going to have a offer enough to make it worth their time? And what does an offer like that look like? What does an offer like that look like for a team that's in the division? We've seen the White Sox not want to trade with the Twins with Eric Fetty. Did the Tigers feel the same way about Torkelson? Because of how often they'd see him, he could torch them if he were to find his way. I think what it comes down to is it's kind of a cautionary tale of why teams generally don't pick kind of the stiff, heavy-legged corner guys first overall because their profiles are just so hard to justify value. It's not entirely unlike why Pete Alonso is struggling to get a big deal, or as big a deal as he wants in free agency, is, he overplayed his market a little bit, but he's a first baseman. And when first basemen don't hit for the power you expect and have like a 780 or 800 OPS, that's still a nice player, but you don't want to pay market value for that. Now, Torkelson being as young as he is and still being in that pre-arb and ARB 1 coming up here, maybe that's a selling point. Maybe they do what the White Sox didn't and get out a year early, because right now, if you tried to trade Andrew Vaughn, you wouldn't get anything. He was tendered a contract, so I think he's going to get like $6 million via arbitration raise. If you want to get out in front of that, like the Tigers could, and maybe get, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of what they really would look for. Probably, prospects or whatever. It could be an option. I don't know if they'd trade in the AL Central. I think that's a stumbling block that we need to account for. But, with that said, would I be against adding him to, what the Twins have in place already at first base, which is not that much? It's bodies, but it's not first base bodies. It's kind of like, where does everybody else shake out and who's left? You know what I mean? I think that to that end, and especially, again, because he'd be cheap salary-wise, I'm not entirely opposed to it. Again, in my article that I wrote recently, I was like Lamont Wade Jr., Taylor Ward. But if those guys are not in the picture, or if they, get a call from the Tigers saying, hey, you can have Torkelson, and they make a deal that is reasonable, I don't know. I'm not running in the other direction. I'll say that much.
The Twins did have made a trade recently with the Tigers.
I know which one it is.
Yeah, you do. We've talked about it before. It's a hyphenated man, Sawyer Gibson Long. Yes, who's coming off like multiple surgeries now. He had a nice in 2023. He had a nice, I think, 4 or 5 starts with the Tigers.
Yeah, he sure did.
Good results. But then Tommy John happened. It's almost like, I'm not saying the Twins knew that he was going to get Tommy John, because that would be very underhanded. But it just seems like sometimes teams, they trade these prospects or these players who might be a good bet to be close to some kind of surgery. So, yeah, we'll do that trade for Michael Fulmer, because I'm not sure if this guy's going to be pitching for very much over the next year and a half. So, maybe it's a coincidence. I don't know, but that's the last time. That's the Al Avila regime. So I don't know if that hurts the chances of the Twins being in another deal soon with the Tigers on that. But that was a deadline deal, August or July or whatever.
For Michael Fulmer.
So, what's that?
For Michael Fulmer,
who is now trying to get back into a starting rotation, I believe. So
I think he's a Red Sox, isn't he?
Yeah. So
I mean, if he's seeing what other relievers are doing, who could fault him for trying? He's already hurt his arm. May as well try to come back and do what you actually want to do. And if it doesn't work, you can say you tried when you ride off into the sunset.
But I mean, I'm sure Falvey is thinking of some great trade opportunities for Torkelson. He's a right-handed power hitter and a first baseman. The Twins need all of that. They could use any of those things, and it's sort of, he's only 25 or 26 years old. Do I see it happening? No, but it's hard. It's hard to envision anything happening right now with the Twins because of the handles and the purse strings. And I'm not sure, it was framed a certain way in at MLB.com that they're just waiting for it to pounce on the big deal, because they're sort of waiting for these other deals to go. I found that to be a little bit pandering to people's hopes and not grounded in reality very much, that the Twins are on the verge of some kind of huge deal because they haven't done any deals so far. Do you get the feeling that is going to happen, that there's some deal out there that Fowler's just waiting for the right time?
Well, not really. I mean, I try not to be negative for the sake of being negative, because what bothers me about sports analysis is that if you're negative all the time, you are right more often than not, and you can pretend that you're really smart. With that said, like, that kind of applies here, because if you say no and nothing happens, you were right. If you say no and something big happens, you were wrong, but nobody cares to come back and tell you about it because they're excited the Twins traded for player X, Y, Z, you name it. And so, honestly, I don't think there's anything huge in the works, and I think maybe that's okay. Like, and I keep saying, and going back to what I wrote at Access Twins, like, they're going to have to probably trade money to get rid of guys, or trade guys to make room for guys to come in to help next year's team. And if they want to get actual difference makers, they're going to have to dip into that prospect cachet as well. I actually saw an article on MLB, I think it was Pipeline today, that said the Twins were one of 9 farm systems that bolstered themselves, like among the 9 who boosted the most. And it was, because Walker Jenkins continued to step forward, and Marco Raya finally threw almost 100 innings. And so even with the graduations of like Zebby and a few other guys, they maintained their spot and moved up a little bit. But I think they're going to have to go to that well if they're going to try to trade for guys who fit in their budget, or if they want to trade for difference makers that whatever they make, regardless. I mean, it's going to be a creativity thing. It's not as simple as going out and giving somebody $15 million for multiple years or this or that. They're going to have to do something big, or something we may not like. And if it's going to be big, then we're really not going to like it, if that makes sense.
Did we mention, had the Carlos Santana deal happened since the last time you and I talked on this?
I don't know, because here's the deal. He wasn't going to come back. Like,
why not?
Well, nobody talks about it, but he wasn't going to. Why don't we talk about this on the other side of our last break?
All right.
We'll take a quick second. That way we can ride it out. It's the holiday season, and if you are in the business of making memories like my family is, Gametime can help you out, whether you're looking to go to a show, a concert, even one of those Christmas concerts like the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, if that's in your neighborhood. Gametime wants to help you get there. Just find your event on the Gametime app, thumb through, make sure you find where you want to go, when you want to be there, everything checks out, and toggle on that full price button, all in pricing, and they will tell you exactly what you're going to pay at the end of the transaction. None of that bait and switch. You find out you thought you were paying $20, you're actually paying $40 on the back end. You don't have to worry about any of that. And the panoramic seat views. Do you want to know what the stage or the field is going to look like? Check out the panoramic seat views. You will know exactly what you are going to be looking at when you get to the venue. The lowest price guarantee. Also, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a ticket in that row cheaper elsewhere. 110%. That's more than the difference. You got to do it. Gametime also has the most flexible customer service policy in the game today. You got to check out that Gametime app. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll get $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time.
So Carlos Santana was never going to come back because they're not spending any money right now until they clear some money. It's got to be chronological. They can't think about it like potential moves in the future. They got to, it's not, it's sort of like in It's a Wonderful Life where everybody thinks that there's money in the bank. I know you're thinking about this place all wrong. There's not literally cash in the bank. Your money's in Carlos Correa, and your money's in Byron Buxton. So there's no, it's got to be chronological. I guess they got to balance the checkbook before they can bring anybody in. And Carlos Santana was not going to wait until February like last year to sign, so he could get to camp early and still get blamed for being there late. He's going to take care of business now and be gone. And but that leaves the Twins without a first baseman, and so he was apparently never coming back because there's just no cash in the building and loan for a first baseman.
Well, and the Athletic had a list of teams who were talking to him, and the Twins weren't on that list. I mean, maybe they just got omitted, but at that dollar figure, they were never coming close to that. And we get this kind of like chatter all the time. Oh, the Twins would like to have him back, and they've discussed it. Well, they're not in the conversation. What did that comment mean 2 weeks ago? If they weren't in the, like, you know what I mean? We kind of get filled with a load of like, how seriously should you take any of this? Because, and it hasn't been their business to bring back free agents that they've signed for 1 year in another year. Like, really, the only guy that they re-upped with was Nelson Cruz, who is was at his best and Hall of Fame caliber power hitter. They don't go back to the well with guys like Donovan Solano and players like that. They're a one and done, for better or worse. I don't know if that's just kind of how it's shook out or if it's just kind of how they do business. But I'm not shocked at all that Santana wasn't coming back, and I never even let myself think he was considering it or they were considering him.
I think I agree, but at the same time, I sort of was thinking about, well, they can't have nobody at first base, and of course they'll have somebody at first base before it's over. That somebody might be Edouard Julien, but they're going to have somebody playing first before it's over. So I still go back to the general state of the division and the transitions that the Guardians are going through, getting rid of Naylor and Jimenez, and the Tigers still not going big in free agency, just kind of going medium, and the Royals again back to not spending money, and the White Sox being where they are, way at the bottom. There's still an opportunity here to win a division, and the Twins are, I guess, they're waiting for that big deal.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we could talk about the wisdom in the Guardians flipping Naylor and signing Santana to roughly the same deal. And I mean, I guess if you convince yourself that they can do similar production for 1 year, negligible difference or whatever, maybe they sold themselves on the idea that because I believe Naylor's going to be a free agent after this next year. And even if he wasn't, it would be a crazy arbitration number that they wouldn't pay. So I think what they were thinking was, we'll pull a switcheroo here because what's the phrase they use on this show? Lord willing and the creek don't rise. No, Kyle Manzardo, they want him to play first base as soon as 2026, or maybe even 2025 if Carlos Santana starts off like he did 2024 and never gets out of that funk. In fact, I saw a really good breakdown of he in the middle of a game added a leg kick. Like, somebody broke it down on Twitter or X or whatever, and then I was like, whoa, yeah, okay. It was like 40 some plate appearances in, he hit his first home run, and between the last plate appearance before the home run and then the home run, he had a leg kick that he just he's like, I'm just throwing it in there right in the middle of a game, and it worked. So yeah, if the Guardians think that they can get the same production and then hand it over to Manzardo, that switcheroo and bringing back a prospect, a pitcher with not great numbers in his first go around, but some interesting things as far as like StatCast bubbles.
Yeah,
it's not the worst idea. It's just, I don't know, $12 million for Carlos Santana. To me, again, not my money, and I think owners should spend money, and I think the Guardians owners, above all, should definitely spend money.
Well, I don't think $12 million is as much money as you're thinking it is. If I can read your mind a little bit, it's not. This isn't 10 years ago. That's not that would be a lot of money 10 years ago. But we've gone through a inflationary period. I just think it's not as much money as a lot of people are making it out to be.
Well, it's a 1 year deal too. You're going to pay a 1 year premium regardless,
for sure. And I mean, who knows about, like, is Manzardo really ready based on samples? His bat was looking pretty good in the playoffs last year. Mm-hmm. They used him in maybe not in every possible situation, but he was coming up with some big hits and power, and it looked like he was bearing fruit. And I wonder with the Guardians, the moves that they've made. I'm not always a huge clubhouse guy, like the mood of the players and all that stuff. I think that could be manipulated and overrated. Mm-hmm. But I wonder, without Naylor and Jimenez, that's like half the soul of the team. gone.
You got Jose Ramirez and a bunch of other guys that you don't know much about.
So I don't know about that. I think I give the Guardians credit for figuring out how to make it work on a shoestring Dolan budget, but I don't know about those moves. I don't. I like I said, I see some regression in the future of pretty much everybody in the division except for the White Sox, and not a lot of progression as far as they're concerned. Hey, the last thing we wanted to talk about, just a couple of words on the Hall of Fame. I'm a Hall of Fame voter for the second year. Last year, I voted for Joe Mauer and 9 other people in my first ever ballot. There is a famous twin on this go around. I think I've said before, I'm Torrey Hunter. I was impressed with him as a talent, as an interview, as a baseball fan. I'm not going to be voting for Torrey Hunter. I don't expect a lot of people to vote for him. I don't know if he'll make the 5% cutoff to stay on the ballot or not. If you pay attention to Ryan Thibodeau's Hall of Fame tracker, I think there have been maybe 30 or 40 ballots cast so far, 50.
That's exclusively on Blue Sky now too, isn't it?
He does updates on Twitter, but it's weird because I don't know. At this time last year, I feel like we knew more than we do now. I think the communication issues with people not really going on Twitter as much as they did before, and Blue Sky still being relatively new as far as people breaking news and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if we know as much as we did at this time last year at this point before the first of the year. But nobody has voted for Torrey Hunter yet. So that's only 50 ballots. There's 300 or 400 voters. So it's 13%.
That's a surprisingly representative sample though. It probably indicates that he will be 5%ed off the ballot. And if Kenny Lofton was, then it's probably a fair fate for Torrey Hunter. With that said, neither Lofton nor Hunter really deserve to fall off the ballot. But what made me so upset about Lofton was I think he's a Hall of Famer or right in there, and to be 5%ed off when a guy like Omar Vizquel, before we knew anything about what a lousy human being he was, gets close. And it's like, if you were watching Omar Vizquel, avert your eyes to the right a little bit, Kenny Lofton is right there doing just about everything as well or better than Omar Vizquel, and in less time, et cetera, et cetera. Torrey, to me, and I liked covering him in 2015 because I got to see what he brought as far as intangibles to a club and what vibe, how I've come full circle with vibes matter, but how vibes are created is anybody's guess. It's not like vibes matter, but you can't force vibes. They just kind of happen. You get on a roll and everybody's kind of feeling it, or you start slow and somebody takes a batting practice naked like Mike Redmond and everybody gets all happy and whatever. It's vibes or whatever. But to see what Torrey did with that 2015 team, it made me happy because I was only a fan when he first came through Minnesota and loved watching him play then. I was also a high school, college kid. He, to me, epitomizes a Hall of very good player. The kind of guy who, in a couple years, not Gaetti will be not enough people talk about Torrey Hunter, and it'll be because he didn't last on the Hall of Fame ballot more than, maybe he makes a second year on the ballot. I don't know. But he's very clearly not going to make the Hall of Fame, and eventually we'll stop talking about him, and that's where his value is he was good enough that you should talk about him. But I don't know, who talks about Torrey Hunter in everyday conversation at the pharmacy or hardware store, It's
not anymore. While he was playing, he was a guy that it's funny. He's the kind of player that baseball needs more of, a great athlete playing baseball, making exciting plays.
Chose baseball over football too.
Absolutely. He statistically though, he's sort of in a Bo Jackson class of a really good player. Didn't have a long enough career of being great to be considered, in my view, a Hall of Famer. He had some really great defensive seasons in addition to great defensive moments. If you look at the entirety of his career on defense, it's not like he's got Andrew Jones's resume as far as defensive statistics goes. He's not
Right.
regarded in that way. So we're not talking about that. And we're not talking about a guy that hit 400 home runs. And we're not talking about a guy who had 2,500 or 3,000 hits or whatever. He just doesn't have the stats. He didn't have a long enough career as a great player to be considered for the Hall of Fame. But when he was out there, he was a hoot and a treat and fun to watch. And the game was better for having him around. So that doesn't necessarily make you a Hall of Famer, but it's somebody I'm glad at least for a couple of years he was on the ballot in that sense so we could talk about him. That's the good thing about people staying on the ballot. They're still sort of in the discourse and the conversation. And I don't know for how much longer he will be, but Torrey Hunter was, maybe the epitome of the Hall of Very Good. I would agree with that. So,
and the story goes that he was like considering going back to football because he had, I don't know where they wanted him. It was probably like Texas or something, but he was like sleeping in his car and whatever because he was a poor minor leaguer. And I'm like, I'm not really sure that story lines up when you think about the fact that he was a first-round pick, and so he probably had a pretty good bonus that doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would have burnt through it without it being some kind of story. So I don't know how true all of that is, but I have it on pretty good authority that the Twins and especially Terry Ryan were kind of like, geez, if this thing doesn't start going in the right direction for him, he might bolt for football because he was a toolsy guy who took some time to figure it out everywhere he went. And we all know players like that. Byron Buxton was not a great major league player right away. And, there's a lot of guys who are that way. We're talking about Spencer Torkelson at the beginning of this show, not being a great player right away. He was the number 1 overall pick. In fact, Torrey, I think, was taken in the same first round as Jason Varitek, and the Twins didn't sign Varitek. But again, Hall of Very Good player, but I don't know how much of the backstory of, he was going to quit and he was living in his car. That sounds like Paul Bunyan folklore to me.
Well, the good news is Joe Mauer's in the Hall of Fame, and they're not going to kick him out. I haven't heard anything about that, so he's going to stay.
Yeah, you would know, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I guess sometimes I feel like I'm the last person to know, but there's no talk of Joe Mauer's Hall of Fame plaque being taken away. So
good,
he's still there, so that's good. Torrey might not make it, but Joe Mauer is going to stay. So
good.
And speaking of having to go, we've got to go. That does it for this episode of Locked On Twins, our 2024-25 offseason progress report for December 22nd. I'm Dave Brown. He is Brandon Warren, and we are going to Alexei Casilla tomorrow night.